In a small house on the peaceful edges of Stillwater, Oklahoma, lives John Roberts, an octogenarian veteran of the Korean War, whose days are filled with the quiet routine of those who have seen much more life than most. The neighborhood where John resides is typical of the American heart, streets lined with ancient oaks, houses with balconies decorated by American flags, and a sense of community that permeates the air along with the scent of freshly baked pies. John is a man of average stature, with a posture that still retains a trace of military discipline, though the years have somewhat bent his shoulders. His hair, once brown and thick, is now a silver crown, and his eyes, though blurred by age, shine with the lucidity of those who have countless stories to tell. On a typical Saturday morning, as John watered his little rose garden, a neighbor, young and energetic Sarah Miller, approaches with a pile of mail that mistakenly ended up in her mailbox. "Sir Roberts, it seems that some of these are quite old," exclaims Sarah, handing him the letters. "Thank you, Sarah. The mailman sometimes forgets that I still exist." John replies with a slight smile, his eyes running through the faded envelopes. Among the letters, one in particular catches his eye. A short correspondence from the War Veterans Association, mentioning the 70th anniversary of the Korean War. The paper is yellowed by time, the blue ink faded, but the words rekindle memories of a time both heroic and painful. That afternoon, as John sits in his favorite armchair, he opens the envelope carefully. The words inside him are not many, but they are enough to transport him back to 1950, to the frozen battlefields of Chosin Reservoir, where he and his companions faced almost insurmountable adversity. "Not many of us are left, John," he murmurs to himself, a shaking hand slightly as he puts the card on the table. "And it seems that even less do they remember." Around John, the walls of his room are adorned with black and white photographs of young soldiers in uniform, framed military decorations, and a faded map of the Korean peninsula. Each item is a fragment of a larger story, a part of a legacy that seems to have faded into the fog of collective oblivion. In the following days, John decides it's time to revisit these memories. He begins to organize his photos, letters, and medals, preparing to share his story, not knowing that soon, a chance encounter would change not only the way his story is told, but also how it is remembered. As he arranges his belongings, he receives an unexpected visit from Michael Johnson, a young history student at Oklahoma State University, who is conducting a survey of local veterans. "Mr. Roberts, I hear you served in Korea. Can I interview you for a college project?" Michael asks, a gleam of enthusiasm in his eyes. "Of course, my boy. It would be a pleasure to help someone interested in that part of our story," replies John, a feeling of appreciation mixed with surprise at seeing the young man's genuine interest. As Michael unfolds his recorder and notebook, John's modestly lit room turns into a silent stage for the account of long-held memories. John begins to tell his stories with surprising clarity, every detail evoking more than just memories. They bring to life the sounds, smells, and biting cold of the Korean winter. "We were there when winter came. It was more than a test of strategy. It was a test of human endurance," explains John, his hands drawing air as if he could shape memories into something tangible. Michael listens, fascinated, as John describes the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, where UN forces, mostly composed of American and South Korean troops, were surrounded by Chinese forces in extreme weather conditions. John speaks of strategies, sacrifices, and heroism, not only his own, but especially that of his companions. "We lost many good men there." John pauses, the emotion evident in his voice. "But we fought not just for our lives. We fought for something bigger, something we all believed in." As the interview continues, Michael realizes that John's story is a crucial piece that was missing from the broader narrative of the Korean War. John's determination to honor the memory of his fallen comrades becomes a central element in the story Michael wishes to tell. At the end of the interview, Michael deeply thanks John for the opportunity and promises to do everything in his power to ensure that these memories are preserved and shared. He plans to present the project not only to his class, but also at a university symposium, hoping that John's story will reach a wider audience. John, in turn, feels a mixture of relief and satisfaction. For years, he believed that the stories of that war, and especially the stories of courage and companionship of those who fought alongside him, had been left behind. Now, it seems there is a chance for these reports to resurface, offering a new perspective on the past and, who knows, a new understanding for future generations. With Michael's promise to bring recognition to these forgotten heroes, John feels a rekindled hope. Perhaps, finally, the sacrifice and bravery of his friends are no longer just silent echoes, but celebrated and remembered stories. Thus, as the sun sets over Stillwater, John looks through his window, contemplating not only the twilight of his own life, but the dawn of a new era for the memory of a long-concluded, but never truly ended conflict. After the initial interview, Michael, excited by the wealth of stories John shared, decides to seek more information to support his project. He knows that for his research to gain academic and historical depth, it will be necessary to validate and extend John's personal account with official documents and historical records. With John's permission and interest, Michael begins his journey into the depths of the Stillwater Public Library archives. The librarian, seeing the young man's determination, suggests that he check out a recently digitized collection of Korean War-era newspapers and military communiques. "You might want to look at this, Michael," says the librarian, indicating the computer terminal where the files are accessible. "We are starting to put everything online, and we already have some editions of newspapers from that time." Michael spends several hours browsing through microfilm and digital files, noting any mention of important battles or references to specific units. It's meticulous and sometimes tedious work, but the possibility of discovering something meaningful keeps you motivated. As he scours through a series of faded articles, a small note in the corner of a page catches his eye. "Heroism in the Reservoir of Chosin, a Forgotten Unit," reads the title. Excited, Michael eagerly reads the article, which mentions a daring rescue operation led by a young lieutenant to evacuate wounded soldiers under heavy enemy fire. The mentioned lieutenant is described only by the initials JR, and the details match exactly the stories John had shared. Armed with this information, Michael realizes the potential impact of his project. He makes copies of the article, along with other references he found, eager to share his discovery with John. The next day, he visits John with a briefcase full of documents. In showing the article to John, he notes the veteran's reactions, which vary between surprise and emotion. "I never thought anyone would remember that," says John, his quivering voice. "Those initials, JR, those are mine. I was that lieutenant." John tells Michael more details about that operation, describing how he and his men had risked their lives to save wounded comrades, many of whom would surely have perished without the intervention of his unit. John's personal story, now corroborated by historical documents, gives Michael a new sense of urgency and purpose. Inspired, Michael decides that John's story deserves a wider audience. He begins planning a documentary, thinking about how the visual narrative could capture the attention of a generation that knows little about the Korean War, as well as honoring the many like John, whose stories remained untold or forgotten. At the end of this meeting, both are aware of the significance of what they are beginning to unravel. It is not just about preserving the memory of a man, but about rescuing the dignity and recognition of an entire generation of forgotten heroes. With this new mission in mind, Michael dedicates himself even more to the project, knowing that every piece of information he now discovers and documents can finally bring justice and honor to the deeds of those who fought bravely and were unjustly forgotten. After initial discovery in the local library archives, Michael decides to expand his investigation to include more comprehensive resources. He contacts Dr. Emily Thompson, a respected historian at Oklahoma State University who specializes in American military history. Dr. Thompson is enthusiastic about Michael's project and offers her guidance and access to the university's academic resources. "Michael, your project can shed new light on many neglected aspects of the Korean War," says Dr. Thompson during his first campus meeting. "Let's start by checking our college files, and then we can think of a trip to the National Archives in Maryland. They have a vast collection of military records from that time." As the documentary takes shape, Michael uses the visuals and audios from the archives to create an immersive experience for viewers. It includes interviews with other veterans, some of whom served with John, who add their own perspectives and confirm the veracity of the events described. These conversations enrich history by showing the camaraderie and strong bonds that formed between the soldiers during the fighting. Dr. Thompson helps contextualize the scenes by providing historical analysis that explains the strategic importance of the Korean War on the global Cold War scene. She highlights how the conflict has often been overshadowed by other more documented wars, such as World War II and the Vietnam War, and the importance of projects like Michael's to bring recognition to those who fought there. This documentary isn't just about honoring John and his companions, comments Dr. Thompson on one of the recordings. It's about correcting the historical record and ensuring that future generations understand the true complexity and impact of this conflict. During the editing phase, Michael strives to intersperse personal narratives with educational segments, creating a balance that keeps the documentary engaging and informative. He also decides to incorporate music of the time, capturing the spirit of the 1950s to transport viewers in time, adding an emotional layer to the film. As the project nears completion, Michael organizes preliminary exhibitions for test groups, including historians, educators, and veterans. The feedback is incredibly positive, with many highlighting how the documentary managed to capture the essence of the soldiers' experience while also providing a robust historical context. I felt like I was there with them, says one of the veterans after an exhibition. You've managed to bring our memories back to life in a way I never thought possible. Encouraged by the responses, Michael prepares the documentary for a larger premiere, planning to release it on film festivals and streaming platforms. He also hosts a special event in Stillwater, inviting John, his family, and the local community. The event is planned to coincide with the anniversary of the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, providing an opportunity for a meaningful celebration and a Q&A session with John and Michael. On opening night, the screening room is packed. The documentary is greeted with emotional applause and, at the end, John is standing ovation. Tears mingle with smiles as the community recognizes not only John's sacrifice, but all Korean War veterans present. It's not just my story, says John, thrilled, to the audience. It's the story of all of us who were there. Thank you for not forgetting us. With John's full documentary and stories now widely recognized, the next natural step is celebration and formal recognition of his achievements. The positive response to the documentary triggers a series of events that will culminate in a national tribute. The first of these events is a local ceremony in Stillwater, hosted by City Hall and Oklahoma State University. The ceremony takes place in the University Auditorium, a large space that fills quickly with community members, students, faculty, and veterans. Banners and photos of John during the Korean War adorn the space, creating an environment of respect and admiration. Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather here to honor one of our own, a hero who served our nation with distinction and courage, the mayor announces as he opens the ceremony. John is called to the stage to receive a recognition plaque, and as he walks, the room bursts into applause. Visibly moved, John accepts the plaque, which is accompanied by a city proclamation declaring the day as John Roberts Day in Stillwater. I'm deeply grateful and a little surprised, says John, addressing the crowd. We who fought in that war often think we have been forgotten. This recognition means more to me than I can express. The success of the local ceremony leads to even more recognition. The Oklahoma State Senator, touched by John's history and community response, submits a proposal to honor John at the national level. The proposal is quickly approved, and an invitation is made for John to visit Washington, D.C. to be honored in the United States Congress. Upon arriving in Washington, D.C., John is welcomed as a true hero. He is taken on a tour of the Capitol before the Congress session, where he will be honored. News cameras from across the country are present to capture the moment, highlighting the importance of the event not only for John, but for all veterans whose stories have been forgotten or neglected. John Roberts represents the best of us, says one of the congressmen during the session. Today, we recognize not only their worth and sacrifice, but we also remind all who served that their courage will never be forgotten. During the ceremony, John is presented with a Civilian Medal of Honor, one of the highest decorations a civilian can receive. The emotion of the occasion is palpable, and many of those present cannot contain their tears. After the event, John's story and Michael's documentary get national coverage, and John is invited to speak at various organizations and schools about his experience. His testimony not only preserves the historical memory of the Korean War, but also inspires a new generation to value and honor those who have sacrificed so much. John's recognition culminates in the creation of an educational program in his honor, developed in collaboration with historians and educators. The program aims to integrate the history of the Korean War more deeply into school curricula, ensuring that the sacrifice and courage of John and his peers are remembered and studied by students across the country. This late recognition, though it cannot compensate for decades of forgetfulness, brings a sense of fairness and closure to John. He reflects on his journey, now understanding that his history and that of his companions will serve as a permanent reminder of human resilience and heroism. John feels grateful and at the same time humble before all the tributes, recognizing that his role in the war was only a part of a much larger collective effort. I hope this helps illuminate all the untold stories of bravery, John comments in an interview for a large television network. And may it inspire a deeper appreciation of what many have gone through in the name of freedom and peace. The impact of John's recognition extends beyond ceremonies and speeches. He becomes a symbol of value and sacrifice, and his story encourages other communities to revisit and recognize their own local heroes. Across the country, other stories of veterans begin to emerge, each with their own lessons and legacies. Renewed interest in the Korean War also leads to new academic and documentary publications, in which Michael plays a significant role. The collaboration between Michael and John evolves into a series of lectures and events at universities, where they discuss the importance of historical memory and the role of individuals in major world events. Our goal, Michael explains during a seminar at Oklahoma State University, is not just to tell what happened, but to explore why it's important to remember and what we can learn from those memories. After recognition and national celebrations, John Roberts' story begins to have a profound impact not only on his own life, but on the whole community and nation. His legacy, now firmly established, promotes a reflection on the values of courage, sacrifice, and the duty of memory. John's story, along with Michael's documentary, becomes a valuable educational resource. Schools across the country begin to incorporate the documentary into their history curricula, using John's experience to illuminate under-discussed aspects of the Korean War and the human impact of military conflicts. Teachers and students respond positively, with many teachers reporting an increase in student interest in history. Use the story of Mr. Roberts in the classroom brought a new life to our study of the Cold War and international conflicts, reports a high school history teacher in Michigan. Students can see the story through the eyes of someone who actually lived the events. Inspired by John's example, a committee is formed to create a memorial in the town of Stillwater, dedicated to all local Korean War veterans. The memorial, set in a public park, includes a statue of John and information signs that tell the story of the war and the soldiers who served. The inauguration of the memorial is a significant community event, attracting people from various parts of the state and representatives of various veteran organizations. This memorial serves as a reminder of the courage and sacrifice these men and women showed, says John during the dedication ceremony. I hope it inspires people to learn more about our history and to value the freedom that so many fought to protect. John's story also resonates on a more personal level for many veteran families. Support groups and veteran organizations report an increase in engagement and interest in sharing and documenting the personal stories of other veterans. Workshops and conferences are organized to help families preserve military memories and relics, ensuring that these personal stories are not lost. In addition, the local university establishes a scholarship on behalf of John, intended for students who are studying history or international relations. The scholarship not only honors John's memory and service, but also encourages new generations to explore and understand the complexity of historical events and the role of individuals in them. The John Roberts Fellowship is more than a financial aid, explains Dr. Thompson. It is an investment in the future of our historical understanding, ensuring that the lessons of the past continue to illuminate the future. For John, the late recognition of his heroics brings a mixture of pride and melancholy. He reflects on his companions who did not live to see such recognition, feeling a responsibility to live in their honor. In interviews and public appearances, he talks about the importance of honoring all veterans and the need to preserve their stories. "Each of us has a story," says John in an interview, "and every story deserves to be heard. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. And this is how we remember the price of peace." John goes on to collaborate with several veteran organizations, becoming an active advocate for projects that promote the well-being and recognition of veterans of all wars. He often visits schools and universities, sharing his experiences and emphasizing the importance of understanding history not only through dates and events, but through the human stories that form the fabric of collective memory. The community of Stillwater and other cities across the country are deeply impacted by John's legacy. Its history becomes a catalyst for other local initiatives of historical preservation. Local museums begin to highlight their exhibits on the Korean War, and commemorative events become more inclusive of the experiences of different combatants. At the national level, John's story inspires a larger movement to revisit and reevaluate the military history of the United States, with a special focus on lesser-known or misunderstood conflicts. Documentaries, books, and scholarly articles begin to emerge, all influenced by John's story and the new wave of interest it has generated. As John ages, he comforts himself with the knowledge that his journey and that of his companions will not be forgotten. Michael's documentary, now available on various educational and streaming platforms, continues to inspire and educate. Schools continue to use their history as a starting point for discussions about ethics, history, and the importance of service. John's legacy, strengthened by his efforts and community support, becomes a powerful example of the lasting impact a single story can have on the memory and consciousness of a nation. It leaves a fund dedicated to supporting projects that teach history in an engaging and personal way, ensuring that future generations can learn from the past in a way that resonates emotionally and intellectually. In his last days, John reflects on the path he took, from the icy battlefields of Korea to the halls of Congress and the classrooms filled with young students. He feels grateful and satisfied, knowing that his story, and the stories of so many like him, will continue to be told, understood, and appreciated, not only as records of past events, but as eternal reminders of the price of freedom and the value of human sacrifice. If you like this exciting story, help us by leaving your like and subscribing to our channel. Until the next story.